So I'm really excited today on lunch break that we're going to be talking to my friend Richard Ramos. We're going to be able to talk about how this journey started and then where it ended up to.
Well, I think it's going to be a really cool blessing because what Richard's doing in the lives of these at risk or troubled youth and the families, he's making a difference. He's being proactive. He's not just being reactive. And I'm all for that. That's why we what we're all about here at 511, and the organization's doing the kind of stuff that Richard and his organization, Parents on a Mission, and what they're doing. I think you guys are in for a real treat, and I'm excited for you guys to listen or watch.
Yeah. Wow, we would have never believed this. We're on Spotify, we're on Apple, we're on Google. Go out there and listen to us. So we're excited about it. We're glad you're excited about it too. Lunch break. Sitting here with my friend Mike Harvey. Thanks for joining us. And another friend of mine, Richard Ramos. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Richard?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
I like it. I got that one, Mike.
Well, hey, good job. I think Richard's got an easy name though, so that was the easy card for you. But
give me credit for something.
Tom always likes to mispronounce everyone's name, Richard. So.
Oh, it's not like to. I just
only 2 syllables. 2 syllables.
Well, we're glad you joined us today. So liking us and subscribing us is a blessing for us. So keeps you in tune with what we're doing. And I think Mike,
if you guys are happy with the mission, you love what we're doing here at 511, go leave us a review. That really helps us.
Yeah, if you got a complaint
and the algorithm there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
If you got a complaint, how can they reach you, Mike?
I think was it Tom Touchstone at but I got to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Covenant Coffee.
Yeah.
If you're a coffee drinker, and I bet you are, because who isn't?
Yeah.
I'm a coffee drinker, and I only became a coffee drinker when my daughter was born. But you guys go check out Covenant Coffee, covenantcoffee.org. We'll make sure that the link is up on the screen. But besides good coffee, which they have great coffee. Tom, do they have good coffee?
They have great coffee.
They have K-Caps, all the things.
And a better mission statement.
The mission, right? So what Covenant does is they exist to provide work skills and all of those things for transitional foster youth, because they noticed, as the same organization was running group homes for a long time, that a lot of the foster kids, they didn't have anything to do or anything like that after they came out of the group homes.
And they made statistics which sometimes aren't good.
The statistics are incredible, and I know Richard knows all of those statistics. I don't know them by heart, but if you knew them, you'd be shocked by them. The number of transitional foster youth or former foster youth that end up in prison, on drugs, homeless, and all of those things. If you guys, and especially after watching this episode, if you guys believe in helping out the less privileged, and the Bible says to do so, go check out Covenant Coffee, because that's what they're all about.
Mike, you almost did that without taking a breath. I was trying to breathe.
I've done this before, Tom.
I know you have. Well, Richard, there again, I'm proud to know you and call you a friend. And some of the things that you've accomplished in your life will amaze people. You have an international nonprofit organization called the Latino Coalition.
No, Parents on a Mission, right?
Well, Parents on a Mission is kind of a standalone.
Okay.
But they are involved with the Latino Coalition.
Okay, got it.
I was with Richard for quite a few years. I was a corporate secretary, but Richard always had me introduce myself as a token. He goes, introduce yourself, Tom, and I would just say, hey, I think I'm the only light-colored person on the phone call. But I loved what Richard did. Loved how he has organized, but the experience was garnered through your life, Richard. Kind of go through that a little bit with our audience, because you've written 3 books, and we were talking before we went on air that Tiffany had edited the last book.
What a privilege! That's cool that she got to be involved.
Well, it's funny because my wife has done this for several authors. But the comment she still makes is that Richard needed very little, if anything, any help with his writing. So that's another tribute to you, Richard. It's so funny.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know who it was that ratted Richard out to me when Richard had been at our church, and I got his phone number and I called him, and it was just something, and I just said, hey, let's get together and have coffee, and we did, and just struck up a friendship and a relationship.
Richard, you got Latino Coalition and then Parents on a Mission. What is the difference between the two, and then how do they tie in together?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. First of all, I really appreciate it. Latino Coalition for Community Leadership. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. It's a national organization. We are an intermediary, which means I like to just say it the way we get money to give money. I mean, it's a little more
It
complicated than that.
is.
Essentially, that's really what it comes down to. We are providing federal, state, and philanthropic dollars to what we call marginalized nonprofits, mostly minority led, because they are not on the radar screen, number one, of most funders, because they're just out there doing great work, but nobody knows about them. But the other thing, too, about these marginalized, they're small most of the time, and they just don't always have the infrastructure or the knowledge and the understanding of what they really need to do to sustain themselves. So, what we do as an organization, we don't only uh, grant them funding, but we also build their capacity. And that's what we really take a lot of pride in doing that. So I've been doing that. I had been doing that for 20 years. I founded that organization in 2003. Now, Parents on a Mission, that goes back even further. That goes to I started it as a gang prevention work because that's the background that I come out of. I grew up in Northeast Los Angeles, and so gangs and violence and drugs, it was always kind of a part of my life. But what saved me out of that was a mother who was a very strict disciplinarian. I was lucky enough to be an athlete, so that was my love. And then, of course, my faith in the Lord, which just really saved me from going down the wrong road, which would have been very easy for me to do. But I always had this desire. I want to believe, I do believe it was a God desire that gave me to give back to the community. I'd seen so many friends uh, on drugs, die, be killed, violence. And so I created this program called Parents on a Mission, which is, as Tom said, it is a separate entity. Actually, Parents on a Mission is a for profit, Latino Coalition is a nonprofit, but we partnered together because organizations hire me to come in and teach their staff. So I train parent mentors and I teach them the curriculum, and then they take that curriculum and they teach it to their constituents in prisons, jails, schools, churches, and other nonprofits. So that's the difference between the two. I mean, I could say a lot more, but basically, they kind of go together. One's a for-profit, one's a nonprofit, but we're all working together to serve and meet a specific need with these families and youth that we're working with.
And Richard, I do believe you still partner with even kind of an intermediate with the legal system and the schools, where if a student becomes a truant, it's sometimes you have to have a mechanism to help them get back on track. And I think the court tells the parents they need to take the Parents on a Mission course.
Yeah, and I wish I had that going in way more counties. We have it in a couple where the judge, there's one where the judge, when they're being released from jail, they require them to go through the Parents on a Mission course, and then out in the community in Colorado, same thing. They require them to go through that course. But I really, of course, I had that going really strong until COVID, and we
Oh
all got
boy.
thrown off with COVID. Everybody got thrown off, and the program was going very strong in every prison in Colorado and here in California, in Laredo, in Bakersfield, where it all started.
Nice.
Actually, you could tell that story. But yeah, that's a big part of Parents on a Mission, is helping mom and dad. deal with their kids they're struggling with one way or another, because most communities, when they have youth problems, they want to create youth programs and nonprofit programs all focused on youth. And what I saw in my experience when I was the at-risk counselor in the junior high school here in Santa Barbara, and then later on in the high school, I started doing home visits. And being a young parent myself at the time in the early 90s, I knew I couldn't believe everything a teenager was telling me about their life and their home life. So I had to go. They didn't invite me to do it. I just did it on my own. I said, you know what? I got to find out what's going on at home. And when I went into their home and saw all the dysfunction, lack of control, no respect, all the dysfunctions that are going on, that's when the light went on for me. And I realized that if I really wanted to help these youth, my students, I needed to help mom and dad, who needed just as much help, if not more. And that's how Parents on a Mission got started.
Well, but the reality of it, Richard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least my understanding is you want to help mom and dad, but the reality is mom and dad are still kind of kids themselves a lot of the time, right?
Exactly. That's right. I mean, we know, marriage, parenting, so much of it is about emotional maturity. And so that I realized, everything I was doing, building them up, encouraging them, I was fighting a losing battle, but I really didn't realize it until I went to their home. I used to have a row of kids sitting outside my office in chairs, just waiting to talk to me. And the teachers and the principals would sometimes get upset and say, "Hey, Richard, these kids need to be in class." And I'd say, "Well, what do you want me to do? I didn't call them down here. They want to come and talk to me." So that was kind of the impact I was making, like a father figure. Um, but I realized when I went to their home, I said, "Man, I'm fighting a losing battle, because no matter what I do, this is what they're coming home to every day." And so the quick story I like to tell on that, I was at a birthday party of a friend of mine, and a gang member had been killed in Santa Barbara. So his father, the grandfather of the child's birthday, whose birthday it was, he was very upset. Came to me at the party, said, "Richard, look at what's going on. You need to get these kids together. They listen to you." Because at that time I had a reputation through our church helping kids out of gangs, and so he knew that. And I said, "Well, I have always talked to these kids, and I will always do that, but it's not the best way to handle the problem." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you're a gardener by profession. Let me tell you in a way you'll understand. If you were to walk down the street here and looked at all the yards of your neighbors, and you saw that the flowers in their yards were dry and wilted and dying, who would you rather spend time talking to, the flowers or the gardener?" And he smiled and said, "Oh my God," he said, "I never thought about it that way." And I explained to him, the flowers in our yard are like the kids in our home. And the problem in this community is everybody wants me to be their gardener.
Yeah.
And I know I'm a Mexican, but give me a break, okay?
That's too funny.
I told him I need more parents taking care of their own flowers. Like, I need more
Yes.
gardeners. And so and that's what Parents on a Mission is. I'm basically raising an army of gardeners that will help parents understand the importance of their role in the life of their children.
And
I
how
love that.
do you do that, Richard?
Well, you know what, Mike, before we get there, because Richard's going to be on all three of the shows, so we're going to go into Ministry Matters, where we're going to talk about Richard's influence and the ethos that he has. And then, of course, I love it when he talked about he was an athlete and how that helped him, because we're going to bring him on Muscle Matters too. But Richard, go back into your youth, your young. I mean, I know there again, you said you had a disciplinarian in the home,
Yeah.
and that kind of laid the foundation. And walk us through young Richard to getting to the Richard now that has the knowledge to be able to bring all this together.
Yeah, well, my mom she was a single mom. I grew up in Northeast Los Angeles. My father was an alcoholic. Unfortunately, I experienced a lot of domestic violence, and for that reason, my mother kicked him out of the house when I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. So, we didn't have wasn't a great, childhood necessarily. Uh, I remember when we went to the store, my mom never paid with money. It was always, pulling food stamps out of the booklet, and just living that kind of life. We never had a car until my mom never drove ever, and we would always have to get rides everywhere we went, and riding the bus. So growing up in East LA barrio, you just, it's just the way kind of life is. But because my brother and I both were, I hate to say it myself, but pretty good athletes,
Mm-hmm.
and so that became the kind of our escape. And even when we were hanging out with the gang, they would always encourage us. No, man, you guys do your thing, man. You guys got to play ball, because we had the talent. I mean, varsity baseball, varsity basketball, varsity football. I mean, I played all of those. Played college football, college baseball. So that was just in me, and it became
Mm-hmm.
that love in my life. Became more important than drugs and the gangs. Although I did drugs for quite a few years until I got saved, actually. But as a child, I'm the youngest of five children, and I was telling, I forget who I was asked talking to this about. I was never an A student. I've never
Mm-hmm.
been the top of the class kind of kid. I was a C student in junior high, a C student in high school, a C student in college, barely making it, just wanting to play ball. But
Mm-hmm.
like you said, Tom, thank you. I mean, here I am now, writing books and
Mm-hmm.
teaching teachers and teaching counselors and other people, and they take my curriculum and they teach it, and so it's very rewarding. But I was never the what's the word, the valedictorian.
Academic. You
I
weren't
was
the
never the
academic.
academic guy. No, that's,
Yeah, yeah,
but
Richard, you and I grew up in an era when if you were good at athletics, your coach could pull some strings for you, couldn't they?
oh, let me tell you, if it wasn't for that, I
Well,
wouldn't
I
have,
think
I
that
wouldn't have
happened
made,
for me too.
I don't know. I
I
I
wouldn't have
just
made
don't.
it out of college without
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and I can say this because Richard, I've never written a book. That's why I'm so astonished with you and your path because I got out and I was never the smart kid in class. I used to. My wife and I have a saying, and I kind of formed it from me that kids will be bad before they'll be stupid, and that was me. You know, if there was a test coming, I'm getting kicked out of class. You
Hmm.
know, I go, I'm not going to, Tommy's not going to have the big F on the paper handed back to me the next day. I just will just avoid that. And other people took notice of that and they helped me bear down a little better. And I'm like you, I mean, C is a passing grade. C minus is a passing grade. D plus will
Even
get you there. And you can say that looking back. I mean, I can humor around that with Johnny sitting right here because he's a doctorate, and I say it fondly because other people you had to let other people in your life to help you achieve something that I think we can look backwards and say, hey, God had His hand in it. You know,
oh,
because without providence, there would be no
yeah.
none of that. So I love that story, Richard. And as you did see that life, there's something in you that started to say, I want to help others. And I do believe we all have that philosophy. We want to give a hand up, not a hand out. You know,
Well,
and that's what
that's
I love about you. One time you told me, as I was getting more involved with what you did and the Latino Coalition and Parents on a Mission, you said, Tom, we have to be able to stop these kids from getting involved with the gangs, and that's to be able to help their parents,
right.
give them parenting skills that would help, them have a better life and help avoid the kids getting into that lifestyle. Because once it's in, there's, like we were talking about statistics, there's statistics once you're in. And it's neat. It's interesting that you had an athletic skill that even the guys that were in the life said, hey, you need to follow your skills because going our way, you might have a shorter lifespan.
Yeah, it's a little harder. Intervention works, and I did a lot of intervening. But when it comes to gangs, I always felt that the police and everybody, the community, they had the wrong question, and they framed the wrong question. And they wanted to know, why do kids join gangs? And I said, well, that's the wrong question. You're asking the wrong question. The real question you should be asking is, why do most kids not join gangs? Because most kids do not join gangs. You can't show me any barrio, any neighborhood, any school campus where most of the kids are in a gang. It's never that way. It's always a minority, but yet they live in the same neighborhood, go to the same playgrounds, go to the same school. So what is the difference between those that do and those that don't? Well, to me, obviously, it's the home that they come from, and that is, what makes the difference. And so I believe that if we want to prevent kids, not intervention, like I said, it's very powerful. As a matter of fact, the Lord and the power of the gospel is the best intervention that I've ever seen. So intervening, but how do you prevent a young child from ever going down that path? And that's why mom and dad are so important. And even single mothers or blended families, or grandmas raising kids, however it is, if they have that solid affectionate attachment and loyalty, uh, parents winning that loyalty and earning that respect and of their authority, they have a really good chance. I always say it's somewhere in the 90% chance that they're never going to choose a negative lifestyle. That doesn't mean they won't make mistakes. That doesn't mean they won't make choices that are not good. But as far as choosing the negative lifestyle, like a lot of drug addicts and gang members do, they're not going to do that. I experimented with those things, but there was something that was in me that my mother gave us, and that's where I drew the line. I knew that there was only so far I was going to go with that.
Richard, talk a little bit about that. Mentors in your life, or the life philosophy that you adopted early that helped you kind of chart your course. Were there people there that maybe helped the young Richard become that guy?
Well, the early mentors, of course, were my relatives, because my dad was not
Yeah.
a mentor to me. He was really more antagonized me and gave me a lot of complexes, because he would always be on my case about one thing or another. But I had uncles and friends, dads of my friends, and coaches.
Yeah.
Those were the people who really mentored me and helped me to realize that I had something to give, that I had a talent that I needed to pursue. Uh, and my mom was probably maybe even the greatest mentor, because she was a great example, putting up with my dad and putting up with all of us. We were, my brother and I and my sister. I'm the youngest of five, so my brother and three sisters. We were we were tough to handle, and she handled it. And all of us to this day, we really credit my mother with who we are.
What inspired her? Was there a faith system in her life, Richard?
Well, she, raised in the Catholic faith, and after my brother and I got saved and witnessed to my brother. He thought I was crazy and I lost my mind. And
Why is it that way, Richard?
yeah, I don't know. It's just, and then when we told my mom, she was so mad that we were leaving the Catholic Church. And I said to her, Mom, would you rather have me and Tony the way we've been as Catholics, drinking, drugging, coming home drunk, coming home on drugs, out wait and then not hanging out with the gang? Which is that? Look at us now, completely transformed, completely 180. No drug, no drink, nothing. I said so, but she couldn't. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
But as time went on and she saw our life, and then we
Mm.
started pastoring, answering that call, then she finally, came around. And I think one thing that I might have turned her, I said, Mom, one of these days, I don't want to argue with you anymore. I said, I just want you to do one thing. Next time you get an opportunity, I want you to ask the priest if he can forgive you of your sins. I said, I just want you to ask him that. Or can you go straight to Jesus and he would forgive you? I said, just so I think that really got her thinking. And not long after that, she gave her heart to the Lord. And she was a very devout,
Wow.
committed Christian.
I love
But
that.
it's not the religion that made the change in you.
No.
It was the relationship with Jesus.
Absolutely. Well, we had religion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
But there was nothing there. But when we had that relationship, nobody's going to tell me that on September the 5th, 1980, that I did not meet the resurrected Savior, because I did. And I'll never, there's just nothing that can ever change that.
Tell me about that, Richard. How did that happen?
Then as Tom knows my story, the mother of my children who passed away, unfortunately, of breast cancer in '94. But before that, when we were just getting together, we were not Christians. We were not saved. But for some reason, this is all providence of God. I would every morning before we went to work here in Santa Barbara, and we would listen to Chuck Smith on the radio. I don't know why. We just would listen to Chuck Smith, and I liked listening to Chuck Smith.
Yeah.
One day we got so convicted, we didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do, but I was so convicted of all the sins and all the things I had done. So I wrote him a letter to
Chuck Smith.
And they got back to me, but the tape they sent me didn't really help me. But then they made an announcement on the radio that Chuck Smith was going to be speaking at a church in Santa Barbara. Go figure. So I told my wife, we're going to go to that. We walked into church, all the, no offense, all the white people. I'd never been in a Christian church, ever. I walked in there, sat down, listened to Chuck Smith. I'll never forget, he preached on Samson and Delilah. But at the end of the message, he said, now you might be sitting there worried about what people are going to say, but yet you're struggling with your life. You're wondering what to do. He gave that very beautiful pitch. He said, but if you want to change your life, raise your hand right now and you can give your life to Christ. And we did. And I'll never forget, both my wife and I, I swear I walked out of that place on air. That's how light I felt of this burden that was lifted from me, that I'll never forget it.
And then part of your story is you went on to be in the ministry.
Yeah, well, that's even more crazy. I have a lot of crazy stories, and I have to go back to when I was 2 years old. Tom, I think you know that story. When I was 2 years old, I was saved on a train tracks. A train was coming to run me over,
yes.
And policemen came, outraced the train, jumped down the embankment, and pushed me off the tracks right as the train was going by. So wow. I know I was saved to save lives. And that's a whole story myself, and that's in one of my books. But what was it? What I'm sorry.
I just said you went into the ministry. With your calling.
So
I'm going down the rabbit hole, Richard. I'm not just staying on the surface. I'm digging down.
10 months after I'd been saved, 10 months. I'm the gardener of the church. I'm just a volunteer gardening, cutting the grass, and then the pastor came out and said, "Would you like to teach?" Now, maybe he did this because he knew I was working on my master's degree at the time. He said, "Would you like to teach Bible study on Sunday?" Now, remember, I don't know anything. I just figured that was normal, and I said, well, yeah, okay, sure. 6 months after that, he asked me to take over the church.
I remember.
Now, I've not been to seminary. I'm a rookie. When I think back about it, and I was 27 years old, I think, that to think that I did that, really knowing nothing about budgeting, about administration, about writing sermons, but he saw something in me, obviously, and I accepted it. At the church was about 25 people at the time. Well, we grew and grew. I planted several churches. It's just been one gracious calling on my life after another. God has been so gracious to me, so gracious, and he's always kept me knowing that this is true about the Latino Coalition too, and Parents on a Mission. It's way bigger than you, Richard. Without me, you could never do this. And I'm all like, amen.
Richard, I want to ask you a question, and Tom, don't get mad at me. I'm making an executive decision. We're going to go a little bit longer on this one.
Okay, now he can do that, Richard. So go ahead.
I haven't asked you, and I don't know why it escaped me. About your books. You've written 3, you said, when you're getting ready to write another one. So tell me about the 3, and then tell me about the one you're going to write.
Yeah, the first two books I wrote were on gang prevention and gang intervention, and it's
Hmm.
really the message is about parents, really. Um, but they were on. I told a lot of stories in there, and they're on gang. It's about gang prevention. It's about how faith is important. It's about police and law enforcement and how they, sometimes don't get it right. How that we shouldn't look at gang members as the enemy in the community, but rather they are people who live in the community that need help. Law enforcement is not a solution, it's a necessary disruption, and just different things like that. Then my
Mm.
third book, the one that Tom's wife helped me edit, that book is called From the Margins to the Mainstream,
Hmm.
Preparing Latino Youth for Leadership in the 21st Century. And my focus there was leadership and wanting to speak to the young Latino men and women how to become a leader in your community and go from the margins where you're kind of ignored and left out to the mainstream so that you can have influence, because I believe that that's what leadership is influence. And so that book is based on principles of how to become a leader. This
Well,
book
well,
now is Parents on a Mission. It's the everything I teach, I'm putting it in a book as far
It's
as
the anthology.
yeah. Yeah.
So
well,
how?
my wife said it was when she was editing it, she would have to catch herself because it was compelling.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so she said to Tom, she goes, Richard's people need to read this book because Richard has a lot of ideology methods that he has formulated that will change culture.
So how do I get a copy of those books? Because I'd like to have them on my bookshelf. But can I ask a special favor? Can I get you to sign them for me?
Sure, absolutely. You can get them on Amazon. They're on Amazon.
Okay.
Just if you put in Richard R. Ramos, use my
Okay.
middle initial. You can see it here. If you put in Richard Ramos, a lot of other, but if you put Richard R. Ramos, the
So
book.
if you're watching and you want the book, we're going to make sure and have a link there for you, Alex. If you can take care of that, please make sure the link's up. But yeah, I'd like to get a copy from my library.
I like
I'd
it.
be happy to do it. Happy to do
Rich,
that.
Richard, we're going to give you the last,
Minute or two or
yeah, just
whatever.
your thoughts, something you might want to say to somebody if they're looking in and you're out there, maybe speaking into their heart. Because I love the fact that you've got the spirit and you've got the understanding, the life experience, and you've actually proven yourself out.
Well, those of you that are watching, if you're a young person and you're just kind of wondering uh, what you want to do in your life, I just want to promise you that you have a purpose and that you were born on purpose with a purpose. You were not put on this world in this earth to do drugs and get go down the wrong road. That's just a script that wasn't written for you. And if you've been living that script, you can rewrite your script, and you should just
Mm.
know that you have the power to write a script that is the purpose of why you're here. If you're a young parent, I just invite you to go to parentsonthemission.org and allow me to just give you some inspiration or some encouragement. But the thing about parenting is that you have to know this: you are the most important person in the life of your child. And most of the time, when I ask parents that, who's the most important person in the community? It's the politician, it's the pastor, it's the priest, it's the policeman, it's the superintendent. No, it's not. The most
Mm,
important person in the life of your child is you, not the
Mhm.
coach.
amen.
It's you. And so you should just know that. And if you're someone who's in ministry, don't underestimate the gift that God has given you, because when you are authentic and transparent, the life flows out of you. And that is what touches people and transforms, changes their life, and gives them hope.
Mm.
Amen. Hope is what, and hope in this age is what we need.
So parentsonthemission.org is where we need to go if we want. You got all sorts of resources there. What do you have there?
I don't. There's a free video for if you want to get to know what I teach. You just give your email and the video will come to you. There's also a documentary there
Hmm.
on what Parents on a Mission is about. No, right now I don't. I have to do a better job of putting my other resources, which is why, again, like I told you, I'm stepping now more into this entrepreneurial field because I haven't given time to really use the social media to promote what I've been doing. But there's something there, a couple of things there that if you go there, things that are written there and the videos that are there that you can see. And then if people have more questions, they can just send me an email.
And I think we're going to be able to collaborate with Richard and help him out with that, right, Mike?
Yeah, so the people I like to get behind is people like Richard who are doing something that's making a difference. It's not about them. Yeah, it's a for-profit business, but just like what we do, it's got to be about something more important than the money, right?
Yes.
Because you can go anywhere and make money, right? It's not about the money. It's about making a difference in communities and like you said, being proactive, right? And I know you didn't use that exact word that I remember, but intervention is reactive. What you're doing is proactive, and you're changing lives before they come into those problems. And I love that, Richard, and I want to get behind that.
Well, and I think that's how we change the future.
Yeah.
One person at a time.
Well, and that's at least my calling, and I think our calling here at 511 is to not only promote the values of faith, family, and freedom, but support the organizations doing the work behind those values. And Richard, that's you guys.
It is, Richard.
Yeah. One last thought. You just reminded me of, Tom. You know how they say it takes a village to raise a child? And I'm Parents on a Mission. I say, no, it does not. It does not take a village to raise a child. It just takes good parents to raise a child. But think about this. One child can raise up a whole village.
Amen. I love that.
That's heavy. That's
hey,
good.
We've just had an episode of Lunch Break with Richard Ramos. He's going to be on Muscle Matters and Ministry Matters. So if you haven't seen those yet, you want to watch those because Richard's going to be able to.
Or listen if you're on audio.
Yeah. If you just you're at the gym and doing an exercise and listening to the audio, hey, that's why we're on all the platforms, right?
That's right. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. God bless.